Because my family thought I was crazy. I was certainly not making any money. I was not getting any recognition. The bottom line was I finally just had to answer it and said, I'm doing this just for the love of the game, just for its own sake, and I'm going to keep doing it, even if I never do succeed. So that's sort of my answer to the question, what if nobody likes it? That we should be
Right.
doing it for love of the game, just because we don't have a choice. This is what we are. We're writers, we're artists, we're musicians, whatever it is, and we've got to find a way to do it one way or another.
Oh, you guys, welcome to a very special episode of the Terri Cole Show. I have never done this before in all the years I've had the show. Today, I'm interviewing Steven Pressfield, who I have had on the show before, who is, I'll tell you all about him if you don't know him. Many of you do know him. But I'm also having my husband, Victor Juhasz, on the show, which is very exciting because he collaborated with Steven Pressfield on his latest book, which is called The Daily Pressfield. And it's wonderful. And this collaboration created basically a friendship between Steven and his partner Diana and me and Victor, and we went out to Malibu and we stayed at their house and they signed a bunch of copies and it was wonderful. So let me tell you a little bit about Steven Pressfield if you don't know him, and then I'll tell you about my hubs, and then I will let you listen to our interview. Pressfield is the best-selling author of fiction and nonfiction, The Legend of Bagger Vance, Gates of Fire, The Lion's Gate, as well as the classics of creativity, The War of Art, Turning Pro, and Do the Work, and his latest memoir, Government Cheese, which, by the way, I loved. His Wednesday column on his website, which is stevenpressfield.com, is among the most popular writing blogs on the web, which is incredibly true. And there's so many of Steven's books that Vic and I have listened to on tape. And I actually read The War of Art many years ago before I knew Steven personally, because it speaks to resistance, which for many of us, whether you're a writer or whether you're an entrepreneur, we all experience self-sabotage and resistance, which is what a lot of Steven's work is how to combat that, basically. And let me tell you about my honey bunny, Victor Juhasz. So for 50 years, Victor has enjoyed straddling the world of serious and humorous images. Major magazines, newspaper, television, advertising agencies, and book publishers, adults and children, both national and international, have commissioned his characters and illustrations. He's also a repertorial illustrator who's embedded visual documentation of soldiers and Marines in training, combat, and rehabilitation from wounds received in combat are a part of the permanent collection at the USAF and the National Museum of Marine Corps and the Society of Illustrators in New York. And Vic's also work as a part of the permanent collections at the Society of Illustrators, the Norman Rockwell Museum, and the Britten Museum in Wyoming. So Vic has been doing this for a very long time. You've probably seen his work on the cover of Rolling Stone and many other places. He is very varied in his skills. And he also does now, for our house, he does tons of landscape painting, which I love, love, love. Okay. So we're talking about two men who are giants in their field, both of them. So them coming together in this collaboration was so much fun, and interviewing them was so much fun. So I really hope that you guys enjoy this interview with Steven Pressfield and my husband, Victor Juhasz, as much as I loved doing it. Well, I'm super excited to welcome to the Terri Cole Show. This is a very special show, you guys, because I'm welcoming my pal, Steven Pressfield, and I'm also welcoming my husband, Victor Juhasz. So, welcome, you guys.
How you doing, babe?
I'm all right.
Hi, you guys. It's great to be here.
Indeed. All right. So many things to talk about. Steven, you are a frequent flyer on the show. We've talked about other books. I absolutely loved, Vic and I both loved Government Cheese. That was your memoir that came out not that long ago. Put Your Ass Where Your Heart Wants to Be. Love that also.
Last of the Amazons. Loved Last of the Amazons.
Yes. Loved Last. We could keep going.
Okay.
Obviously, we're big fans. But this is something really special that you guys got to collaborate on this beautiful book that is out right now. And it's called The Daily Pressfield. Those of you watching on YouTube, you can see the gorgeous cover. There is Steve, and there is illustrated by Victor Juhasz. So I want to talk a little bit about sort of the format of this book, why this book, really for you. What was your motivation, Steve, for, behind creating the Daily Pressfield? Let's just start there.
In the last couple of years, I'm not sure why this has happened, Terry, but people have come to me and said, I want to write a book and I don't have a clue how to do it. Where do I start? And I know in my various books, like The War of Art and Turning Pro or something, I've got, a chapter here and a chapter there about so much, but nothing that kind of pulls it all together to kind of answer that question. And I thought this 365-day devotional kind of form of a book would be a great way to do that, because you could start on day one, which we do in the first chapter, Vic, right? Is
Yep.
when you open your eyes on the first day. So the book is something like, if you wanted to write a book or start a podcast or do any kind of long range project, that you could put this right beside your laptop, the book, and start on day one, and it would kind of take you through. And in the middle of the book is really about second act horrors, and the end of the book is kind of about what does it all mean. So
Right.
that was kind of the point of the whole thing, Terry, just to sort of answer that question that people have been asking me lately.
Okay, so let's talk about what's included in this book. And side note, I'm writing my second book right now, and I have to say I can't tell you how many times, because I feel so much less alone, even though this book is not just for writers, but it is for writers too. It's for anyone doing anything. You're undertaking anything that seems overwhelming. And being in the middle, I feel like I'm in act 2 right now of my next book.
I feel for you, Terry.
Oh my God, it's so painful. So I do want to sort of get into Act 2. Like, what does Act 2? Let's talk about it in writing terms, and then let's talk about it in other terms. If you're a dancer, if you're an entrepreneur, what might sort of being stuck in Act 2 look like?
Well, here's another way to look at it. Like, imagine you're a football player in the NFL, and it's a season, right? Now, the first few games are exciting. Your energy is up because the season's just beginning. Everything's fresh, right? At the end of the season, you're in the playoffs. Maybe you're hoping to get to the Super Bowl. You're excited about that. But the middle of the season is a real grind, right? Everybody's hurt. Their Achilles is all screwed up, et cetera, et cetera. You're tired. You can't quite see the end. You're worn out from the beginning, and it just becomes a grind for anything at all, right? Starting a podcast, working on your book, anything at all, Terry. So, and that's the moment in a writer's life where you don't know, you think, why did I even start this thing? I wish I had never done this. I'm never going to get to the end. And there are kind of, I don't want to say tricks, but there are ways to kind of get through that. And in any event, it's great to have somebody encouraging you. This is what this book is trying to do, and
Yep.
that you're not alone. This happens to everybody, and just keep grinding. That's those Act 2 horrors.
It's so true. And I think that part of what the book is doing for me, the Daily Pressfield, is making me feel so much less alone, because the thing that's interesting, and I know Vic goes through this as well, right? Undertaking any big artistic something, is that you feel very alone. You feel very much like it's all on me. And if I don't figure it out, I'm a failure. I'm a loser. I don't know what's going on. Who do I think I am? For me, it gets all into the imposter syndrome starts kicking up. Like, who are you to write this book and whatever? So I love having something that I can go to every day. So let's change gears a little bit. And in this book, what inspired you, A, to want to have illustrations in the book, and then B, what inspired you to hire Vic?
Well, that's a great question. And it all came from my business partner, Sean Coyne, and Ryan Holiday, who both had worked with Vic. And it was actually Sean's idea to have illustrations in the book. And he said, Vic is just a great guy. He's an incredible guy, incredible illustrator. You got to have him, So I was thrilled. I'd never done it before. And just to tip my hat to you, Vic, when the way it worked was I kind of wrote the book first, and then Vic sort of had to we decided that 52 weeks to a year, we would do 52 illustrations. And each week in the book has a particular theme. But what Vic had to do was come up with some kind of illustration of that theme. And these were hard themes, like, who am I? The opinions of others, or what if nobody likes it? These were like kind of the week long. And, I'd like to hear you, Vic, answer kind of how you attacked those problems because you came up with such great solutions.
Yes.
First of all, thanks to Sean and thanks to Ryan, because it was actually Sean who got me hooked up with Ryan in the beginning, and he was so happy with what he saw with the Boy Who Would Be King book that I worked on with Ryan. He said, how would you like to work with Steven? And I was like, yeah, sure, absolutely. I had come to know you through my sons, and who all were very aware of the war of art. Our youngest one, Ben, who was in the Corps, was very aware of the Gates of Fire, which was kind of like required reading, I believe, and in the Corps. And so they were very tuned into Stephen's work even before I was. Once that happened, once I realized that there was a connection between Sean, Ryan, and Stephen, this all kind of fell into a very nice place. So Sean threw it out to me. Stephen seemed very intrigued, and I found myself reading the manuscript. I got all these weeks together. I think initially we were talking about let's do a couple of drawings for each week, and then we kind of got realistic and said let's just do one theme drawing per week. And still, that's 52 drawings because there's 52 weeks. And going through the manuscript, I found that this was either going to be a hodgepodge of images, or it was going to have to be unified around certain thematic leitmotifs, visual leitmotifs. I went with the one that I thought would be the easiest first, and that was resistance. So once I kind of visualized resistance as being this just jumble of lines that becomes something not entirely definable, but it's there, and it's kind of like initially it overwhelmed the illustrations, and was very acted as an oppressor of sorts. So I said, "Great, we got that." But as this calendar book proceeds, we're getting away a little bit from the resistance itself. It's not all about the resistance. Then it becomes a lot of observations and advice from Stephen regarding just the creative process, separate from resistance. So then it was a matter of coming up with some more leitmotif images that I could start spreading out through the course of those 52 weeks. And they could all echo each other. They're basically theme and variations. If you want to think musically, you got the first image, but then we started taking it along. So the jumble of lines was resistance. The creator or the artist was based on one of my favorite paintings, The Wanderer by Caspar Friedrich, the great German painter. And I used that. I love that image, and I've used that in any number of illustrations during my career. But I said, oh, this is perfect. The writer, the artist, overlooking the landscape. And from there, we jumped off. We were able to jump off through the entire course of the book to play with that as well. Variations on that image.
Excellent.
Those were just two of the leitmotifs that we were working on.
Right. So let's talk a little bit. That's really, thank you for sharing that, Vic. That's really helpful to sort of understand your own process. For you, Steven, let's talk a little bit about resistance, because a lot of the people who watch this and listen to this are very familiar with your work, and then a lot will not be. So let's talk about the notion of resistance, because I have to say, honestly, your description, your introduction, my understanding of resistance from you, it's not just Oprah who was relieved, right? Oprah was relieved to find out about resistance from you, and not feel like so bad about herself. But I felt the same way. So I want to know, for you, how did this concept come about? And it stayed. It's still around because it's still happening, because if you're doing anything in life, you are battling resistance every single day. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, if sort of a quick definition of resistance in my mind with a capital R is like if you have ever bought a treadmill and brought it home and found it gathering dust in the attic, then you know exactly what resistance is. It's that force. And it's certainly if you're a writer and you sit down in front of one of these things and you're looking at the blank page, you can feel a force, a negative force kind of irradiating off that page, trying to stop you from doing what you want to do. Resistance takes the form of a voice in your head. Like you were talking, Terry, about imposter syndrome. What that voice says to you, and it seems to be your own voice. It seems to be you thinking these thoughts. It's really not, but that's what it is. And it says something like, you're not good enough to do this project. Who do you think you are to tackle this subject? This has been done 1,000 times by other people, way better than you're ever going to do it. You're too old, you're too young, you're too fat, you're too thin, you've got too much education, not enough, blah, 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 blah. And it will tell you you're a bum and a loser. And it's also, at the same time, it's accompanied by tremendous fear. Then beyond that, resistance will also, its next best weapon is distraction. As you're sitting down at the blank page or whatever it is, it will try to say to you, well, today's the day, let's go to the beach. We'll do this tomorrow. Today's not the right, blah, blah. In any event, it's all of these forces of self-sabotage, fear, self-doubt, arrogance, complacency, and on and on and on. Everything that will stop you from doing what you're doing. And for my first, 10 years of trying to write, resistance just kicked my ass and made me quit things at the last minute, et cetera, et cetera. And I never even knew it existed. And finally, one day I sort of said to myself, there's a force here. This isn't just me. There's some kind of a negative force out there. And if I could just get around it, I could actually do my work. So in any event, it's kind of a long-winded way of describing what resistance with a capital R is to me. Self-sabotage, self-doubt, fear, procrastination, distraction.
Love it. Okay, so when you were pulling this book together, you've been writing about resistance and experiencing resistance for many years. Did you give Vic ideas about what resistance should look like, or like what was that collaborative process? Was there a collaborative process that went on? Or
no, there wasn't. I really, it was really up to Vic. He just sort of looked for the themes in the piece. Correct me if I'm wrong, Vic. And thought, how am I going to visualize this? How am I going to? And that was a real challenge. What Vic came up with was really a monster. This jumble of lines was like a monster that was terrorizing the poor artist trying to follow on his or her hero's journey. But it was all Vic that came up with that.
Yeah. And how was that for you, Vic, to basically have it be you coming up with the ideas?
It was perfectly fine, actually. I felt that there was great trust from Steven to just take off with it and see what I could do. And consequently, I really thought about it, started working on some ideas. If I remember correctly, I took that little cubby space in our bedroom and set up that picture of Friedrich's Wanderer over the table, over the desk, and just started sitting down there and started working on the ideas for the book. Not in the studio here. I just sat down there because it was this kind of like this more confined, closed, almost like womb-like space. And I just kept on reading the manuscript, working, and then just started laying out how can we start positioning these images through the book and playing off the thematic material. One thing that Steven was talking about before, and that came out in your interview with Rick Rubin, was how this was not just, you said this force, but for you, and I think Rick was totally got what you were talking about, it was like a cosmic thing for you, this force.
Yeah.
It was otherworldly. It was not necessarily just this physical thing within you. There was like it was almost mythological in a sense.
Which I think it is. I think that resistance is a force of nature, like gravity. It seems to be personal because the voice we hear in our head says, "Terry, you're not good enough to do this. or put this off till next year, whatever it is. But in fact, if 1,000 people are doing the same project, every one of them is going to hear that exact same voice. I'm thinking, Terri, can you show some of the illustrations, Vic's illustrations here or Vic, maybe you have some, just so our listeners have a sense of what we're talking about?
Week 4, cover the canvas, right? So
Ah,
you can see what it looks like. And Vic did, actually, I really love this time-lapse video of him actually drawing another version of the resistance
yeah, that's a
sort of
great one. Yeah.
monster.
Well,
And I think that
waiting for you as you wake up in the morning.
Yeah.
exactly. Waiting. Good morning. So we'll actually put links to that in the show notes for sure. What you guys were just talking about, though, with the resistance and the Rick Rubin and the otherworldly, this brings me to want to discuss the Muse, because there's also another worldly some vibe. So do me a favor, Stephen, just talk a little bit about your own experience with the Muse, and then I'm going to tell you how that influenced my writing experience.
Okay.
Go.
And that was another sort of challenge for Vic to, visualize that. How is that going to appear as an illustration or anything? But well, I'll just give a quick definition of what the Muse or Muses are. The Muses in Greek mythology were 9 sisters, the daughters of Zeus and Mnemosyne, which means memory, and their job was to inspire artists. And so the classic sort of image of a muse is Beethoven at the piano and this kind of gossamer female figure sort of whispering in his ear, sort of giving him the tunes that he's going to play. And so to me, as negative and as dastardly as resistance is, on the one side, trying to stop us from doing our work, so sacred and wonderful on the other side is the goddess that is trying to inspire us with the work. And when an artist or an athlete gets into the flow and things are just going, like I was just reading recently that Bob Dylan said that he doesn't remember writing any of his songs. And what that's all about to me is the muse, the goddess, this other force that we can't name or can't define or can't, call on, can't command, comes in and gives us the goods, and, for Vic as well, when he's trying to come up with an illustration or something. So that's my definition of the muse. And Terri, tell me what were you going to say?
Well, that after reading War of Art and a bunch of other of your works, a lot of that was before we were actually friends. There was this relief, another relief that came along with being grateful to inspiration, to the muse, asking in the same way that I would believe in, the universe or a higher power of some kind, where I would ask for relief from something or ask for direction, let's say. That's basically what I started doing. And there was a great interview that you did with another mutual friend of ours, Simon Sinek, where he was talking about this and you were talking about this. He was saying before he goes on stage is basically like a little prayer of like, let this be of service, let this do good in the world, kind of, which is a little different than what you're talking about. You're calling in the muse, which is what I started doing myself. And when you're a high functioning codependent like I am, feeling very like overly responsible, for everything, like it's all on me type of a thing, there is something so liberating and almost, I don't want to say magical, but I kind of feel like, or mystical maybe, it is a better word, of sort of tapping into the fact that maybe I'm not alone. And because I do feel that there is some channeling, something that's happening when we're doing creative. At least for me, it feels that way as a creative endeavor when I'm not forcing it, though,
Yeah, like Rick Rubin, when I did that interview with him, he calls it source with a capital S. That's his word for it. And he believes that it's like the trade winds that are just constantly blowing, ideas and inspiration past us all the time. And our only problem is that a lot of times we don't pay attention. We don't catch the blessings that are going through. But he calls it source with a capital S. And That's as good as for me. I'll buy that. Vic, do you feel like you
I'll take it.
work with that same kind of force when you're doing any of your visual
It doesn't
stuff?
happen. It doesn't. It doesn't happen all the time. As a matter of fact, I find that there are plenty of times where you're kind of banging your head against the drawing table, trying to get something to work or trying to come up with the concept. If it's something that requires more of an idea, and you're just torturing yourself all day. Nothing's coming up. It's one fail after another. The studio starts getting filled up with tossed sheets of failed ideas and stuff like that. And then I give it the way I get to that source is I give up. I'll eventually give up. I'll call it quits, and hopefully the job is not due within the next day or two. Okay, but I'll call it quits, and I'll say, okay, I can't do it, and I'll go and I'll sleep on it, and the odds are very good that I'll wake up with some sort of quantum leap inspiration based on something I hadn't even considered the day before because I was too much in the weeds to see it, you know?
Yeah, like a stepping back process from what it is that you're too close to.
I kind of think it's good at times to admit defeat on a particular day. Like U.S. Grant said after I think the Battle of Shiloh, we'll lick him next time. We'll lick him the next day, you know?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think for me, I get to a point where if something isn't working writing wise, it definitely helps to step away. I was reading this book, The Net and the Butterfly, about breakthrough ideas that I thought was a really wonderful book. And one thing that they say is, step away and take a walk and don't listen to a podcast. Like just let your brain marinate. And it's almost like they call it your genius lounge while it's doing something, being in nature, walking, moving your body. It actually is doing something for the creative process. And again, all of those things for me have me step away from the might makes right vibe of trying to force the crap out of something if it's not flowing or if it's not coming. So I know what you mean, Vic, by like stepping back from it.
And also just jump in a pool, go to the local Y and go swim. That's a great way to clear the head out too.
I mean, I think the mechanism that's happening, in my opinion, when we're trying so hard and it's not working, is we're in our ego at that point, right? Mm-hmm. And when we give up, and I agree with you, Vic, that's exactly how it works for me. What really the ego is giving up. And what happens is we're switching, gears in our psyche to what I would call the self, the capital S self. And that's what solves the thing to me. So, but I do agree. Absolutely. It's a giving up process, but it's the ego that gives up. It's the ego that's the problem, in my opinion.
Yep. I will agree. When I'm forcing, it doesn't work. In this book, though, let's talk a little bit about, so this is hard-won wisdom from Steven Pressfield from many different sources. So let's talk a little bit about what those sources are, because this is your nonfiction and your fiction work. Gems of wisdom are in the Daily Pressfield from both of those, correct?
Yes. And thanks for picking that up, Terri. Yeah.
I did. It's great because it's like your books, the as Vic was saying, what was called The Last of the Amazon, Vic? Was that the one that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Which just completely, we were enthralled, totally blew my mind. But there was so much wisdom in there as well. So I love that there is a combination of things in here. I want to ask each of you, I'm going to start with you, Steve. What would you say one of your greatest creative inspiration is? Meaning other writers whose work sort of has influenced your work the most?
It's a great question, Terri. And I think one of the things I often say is that I'll answer it, the ancients, the Greek stuff, Like I often say, nothing good has been written in the last 2,500 years. And there's a lot of truth to that. I would go back to Homer, to the Iliad and the Odyssey. There's just something about those books that are so primal and written in such heroic terms. I mean, it is about the heroic age, the age of Achilles and Odysseus and so on and so forth. those are real inspirations to me. I can go back to them always.
Amazing. What about you, Victor? What would you say are your sort of biggest creative influences?
Oh God, there's not enough time to talk about all the artists that have influenced me. Music influences me, but not in a tangible way, because it's music. It's not illustration. And at the same time, I find myself thinking all the time when I'm involved in a project, and I'm even down to the way I'm rendering or putting brushstrokes on. It's for me, it's music. How do I compose this piece that's in front of me? From a standpoint of art, I mean, God, I grew up torn between wanting to be like the great animators who did Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck and stuff like that, or Mad Magazine, the earliest iterations of Mad Magazine, and then also I wanted. There was such a part of me that was drawn to the realism that I found in those American heritage books and those fantastic paintings by Howard Pyle and Harvey Dunn and that great American school of illustrators. Right now, I'm on a jag where I'm just looking at so much. Andrew Wyeth too, just blows my mind. Uh, it's realism, and at the same time, it's so abstract. It's so abstract. So all these things influence me. How do they actually manifest on paper? I'm not sure. I can put any concrete definite or timeline to it, but it does show up in certain ways. It just in terms of just inspiring me to take advantage of the gifts that I've been allotted in this lifetime. You know.
But music, it's interesting though, Vic, because you've always been someone, you always have music in your mind. You're always silently conducting something when you're driving, when wherever we are. There's always, and I'm always like, what are you listening to? Even though I can't hear it because it's in his mind. Sometimes I'll be like, well, let me try to find it. We can put that on so we can both be listening to it. But it always struck me in all the years that we've been together of how music is something. You're not a super like highly emotional guy. Like I don't see you as that. I think you have high emotional intelligence, but you're not like a big crier. And yet a piece of music can like inspire a tear in your eye in a way that other things don't. So I do think that it makes sense that creatively it's in there somewhere influencing you. And it makes sense that you wouldn't be able to say exactly how. How attached are you to music, Stephen? Is this a part of your process as well,
I'm
or
really
not really?
more, it's funny enough because I'm not an illustrator or a painter, but I'm more of a visual guy. I'm particularly a movie person, you know? I mean, I will watch the same movie 10 times, 20 times till I basically got it memorized. And, and just responding to just the visuals of the whole thing, even things that are not like giant landscapes or anything, but just little stuff that happens visually. So that, and in fact, when I'm writing fiction anyway, I'm really trying to like write it as a movie, you know, trying to make the reader see what's going on.
Oh, and we do. That's what's so wonderful. When like we're driving, we got the audiobooks on, and you've got all those. You got the narration happening, and it's like, wow, this is you're seeing it on panorama. You know,
Yeah.
on
What's so
cinescope.
what's so beautiful, Stephen, about your work, about the fiction work that I know Vic has read even way more than I have, but is that the way that you write and share details, it's like just the right amount where we can really see it, but we're not bored. Does that make
Mm.
sense? Where like it's making it the image richer. I understand it. I'm like, oh, now I get what's going on. Not to mention, I got to say, like, I didn't go to the best high school in the world, and I don't know that much about history. So, I mean, I'm learning and have been learning because I've been married to him for so long. But I learned so much from all of your books because so much of what you write about is historical fiction. So We appreciate you, Stephen Pressfield.
Well,
That's
thank
all
you,
we're
thank you.
saying. There's so many days I wanted to read, but I'm not going to read them all because it's too long. So I just chose 2 days that spoke to me that I want to read out loud, if that's okay with you guys. All right, day 24, perfectionism equals resistance. Have you ever blown an entire writing morning noodling with a single paragraph or worse, a solitary sentence? Oh, yes, I have, Stephen Pressfield. The enemy has outfoxed you. You've hung up an entire battalion trying to capture an outhouse. So that was from Writing Wednesdays, which is something I wanted to also talk about. You have one of the most popular writing blogs, probably, I don't know, I'm going to say maybe in the world, where you write on Wednesdays. It's for writers, but I find it so helpful. So you guys, all of this info, those of you watching and listening, will be in the show notes. You definitely want to sign up for Writing Wednesdays. And then Stephen puts his 2 cents after that and says, did I forget to say of first drafts, momentum is everything. So again, what this says to me, because I think that so many of the people in my crew suffer from perfectionism, that it has to be perfect. And the freedom that you give us in this and in lots of other things that you write about with perfectionism, and what you were saying with Rick Rubin as well, is get it done, right? Start it, get to the middle, get to the end, and you can make it better, right? It doesn't have to be perfect, but get moving. So is there anything else you want to say about perfectionism and resistance?
Well, it definitely is a big form of resistance. People just noodle with a chapter, a paragraph, a frame of film, or something in an illustration or a drawing, and it's that negative force is sucking you in to do that, to wasting your time, So you do very much have to know when to cut that stuff off, my first agent, I remember I had finished a manuscript. It never sold or anything like that. But he said, how close are you? I said, I'm close. He said, close is good enough. Give it to me. And, I believe that a lot. It's, there's always another draft. You can always do another draft and make it perfect. But once it's sort of ready to roll, let it roll.
Absolutely. And it's funny, the first draft of Boundary Boss, when, they're sending it out to people because you want to get blurbs for the book, I literally did not let them send it to anyone. I was like, it's not ready. And my publisher was like, hi, we created 75 of these things and it is ready. But I was appalled. I was like, but it's not the final thing. They're like, dude, we don't have time to wait for the final thing, or you're not going to get any blurbs for the jacket of the book. But I didn't understand how it went. So yes, I totally get that. And Vic, how does this impact you? Do you ever find yourself working and over noodling something or overdoing something?
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the worst. It's one of the worst things, and it's also one of the easiest traps to fall into. And I think it kind of relates to my recovering Catholicism, because sometimes a drawing comes along very easy, and God damn it, I can't. It took too. It took too quick. It's too easy. There's something I got to keep noodling with it, and I'll destroy an absolutely wonderful or successful. Never call it wonderful, but a successful drawing that was that had all the right lines down on it, and I just felt, but it didn't torture. So let's see if we can make this better. Let's do this. Let's do that. And before you know it, you've sucked the life out of it. You've now stopped drawing, and now what you're doing is you're rendering. At least in my situation, the way I work. Once I find myself becoming a slave to the rendering process, I can almost predict that it's going to happen. I'm going to redo the goddamn piece and start all over again, because I've just ruined a perfectly satisfactory image.
Yeah, all the spontaneity's gone.
Out.
Out. Okay, one other day that I want to highlight. I mean, I could have done a million of them, but I didn't want to spend the entire interview just reading from the book, although I kind of felt like it. So this is day 36, The Unlived life. Most of us have two lives, the life we live and the unlived life within us. Between the two stands resistance. So that is from The War of Art, the preface. So Steven says, if life exists on two levels, the material and the potential, as I believe it does, where are you and I? We're part of both levels. We participate in both. Our struggle, our war of art, is against that invisible, insidious. Now, I don't know if I'm going to say this word right. Indefatigable.
Good.
How
Yeah,
do you say it?
that's how I say it.
Is that right? Amazing. Negative force whose sole aim is to block the part of us that resides on the material plane from reaching out and opening itself up to the part of ourselves that participates in the plane of the potential. So this blew my mind. And I don't know if I read it too fast. I hope that people got it. So basically, well, how about you, instead of me telling my interpretation, you tell me your thoughts on this, Stephen, because I think it's so brilliant and I think it's so true.
I think that our job as artists was one of my favorite illustrations of Vic's in the thing is the one called the Cosmic Radio Station, which is a picture of a 1956 Cadillac Eldorado convertible crossing the flatlands of Texas in the middle of the night with an antenna that's like 200 feet tall going up into the. And I think the artist's job is to tune into the cosmic radio station. And what I mean by that is that the plane of potentiality, the muse, that level that exists above the level. Like before, Vic, when you said about something giving up, it's the ego that gives up and that lets us tune that radio dial and get that thing. So that thing from the higher level. So when I say most of us live two lives, the unlived life within us is the creative life, is the works that we were meant to produce. And what stands between our material life and that is resistance, this negative force that we need to overcome one way or another. And once we do that, then we as artists can shuttle back and forth between that higher dimension and the lower dimension and go up to the higher dimension, find something and bring it back. And that's our job. Simple as that.
I love it. Is this the
Yeah,
illustration?
that's the one. Well, that's one of them. There's actually a couple more, but that's close.
Yeah, that was another leitmotif image that we used throughout the book in variations too. You know,
it's so good, you guys.
Hey, babe, can you read one other thing, because I found it so terrific in the book and revisiting it was it's at the end of the book. It's what if nobody reads our work? You know,
where this came from, Vic. On Writing Wednesdays, my blog, there are a bunch of people that write in comments every time. And one, like about a year ago, came from a Finnish writer, a lady, Katie, and she was like in despair. She said, I just finished my book. I'm 60 years old. I've been working at this for like 40 years. I can't do it anymore. I've never sold anything. Writing is a disaster, and you, Steve, should never have advised anybody to do it. She was living the nightmare that all creative people have in the back of their minds. What if I bust my ass for my entire life and I never do anything that's any good? I never have a bestseller. I never even, whatever. I wanted to address that question. That's particularly at the end of the book, because it sort of is what this is all about. What if we work our whole lives, And I myself, I don't want to blather on for too long, but it took me like 30 years from the time I started until I had my first novel published. It was like I was 52 years old, The Legend of Bagger Vance. And along the way, I had to ask myself many, many times, why am I doing this? Because my family thought I was crazy. I was certainly not making any money. I was not getting any recognition. And the bottom line was I finally just had to answer it and said, I'm doing this just for the love of the game, just for its own sake, and I'm going to keep doing it, even if I never do succeed. So that's sort of my answer to the question, what if nobody likes it? That we should be doing it for love of the game, just because we don't have a choice. This is what we are. We're writers, we're artists, we're musicians, whatever it is, and we've got to find a way to do it one way or another.
I mean, history is filled with incredible stories of absolutely brilliant people in all forms of creativity who don't get recognition in their lifetime. Maybe they're discovered years after the fact. Maybe they're discovered 5 minutes after they die, and suddenly, oh God, and I got one of those damn drawings,
Or maybe they're never
or
discovered
something
at
like that.
all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. But does that change the fact that they did the work? No, it's still their original stuff. It's still important. Vic and I were driving in the car, and we were talking about, I don't know, one of your books, and he was talking about the concept of you basically saying exactly what you're saying now, similarly, that if you write something and no one else sees it, is it still valuable? And the answer is yes, because we are compelled to do it. And you're still compelled and obligated, according to you, and I agree, to do your best, right? To write the best thing you can, to create, to draw the best thing that you can. With this book, where can people get the book?
There's actually 3 ways you can get this book. You can get it just as a book on Amazon, unsigned, whatever,
Yep.
or on my website, which is just myname.com. You can get two different ways. One is the book signed by Vic and me. It comes in a
Right on.
nice little box. And then the other way is a more upscale version that we call the special edition, gift edition. It's signed by Vic and me, and it comes with a companion journal that you can use all the way through the year with a set of cards of Vic's illustrations that are like, what do you call them? Like cards that you can send to people.
Yeah, they're note cards.
The message cards, whatever. Yeah. They're really great. And a few other goodies. And it makes and it comes in a great box. And it makes a wonderful gift. Like if you have a friend or a family member that's struggling with any of their art or whatever, like Terri, here you are working on your second book. This would be a perfect gift to give to you, to say, because to help you get through that. So those are 3 different ways you can get it on Amazon as a regular book, or 2 different ways on StephenPressfield.com.
And the packaging. Perfect. This is such an incredibly beautifully packaged book.
Yeah, we got to give a kudos to my girlfriend Diana. That we're all friends here. It's all her. Yes. She put this whole thing together. I didn't have anything to do with it. She did a wonderful job. And in our garage, we're self-publishing this thing. So our garage, our back room has been to the ceiling with these boxes and stuff. And so it's all hand done with a lot of love.
It sure is. Well, I want to say thank you to both of you so much. I love you both. Mm-hmm. I'm so excited for the world to get the Daily Pressfield. And this collaboration, I'm sure, is the first of many.
I hope so.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Terri. Thanks for having me, and thanks for letting me hanging out with you guys on Crackpot Farm via video and audio.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. And in real life before you know it.
All right. Great.
Hopefully. All righty, pal. Take care.